Real Estate Show with Pat Lopez, where we talk everything real estate. Today, my guest is Al Perry, Century 21 Advantage Gold. Al, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Pat. Great to be here.
Great. Okay, so I always start off the show by asking you to tell your story. So how did you get started in real estate?
So I grew up in real estate. So, it actually started when I was 6. My father passed away, and my mother, who was a stay-at-home mom at the time, she was a legal secretary before she had kids. She had myself. I was the older brother. My younger brother was a newborn. So my grandmother moved in with us. You know, we do what families do. Everyone chips in, figure a way to make it work. And my mother didn't want to go back into being a legal secretary. She had to become the breadwinner for the family. But she didn't want to go back to being a legal secretary because of the rigidness of the job and the long hour expectations and inflexibility on her part. So she decided she'd give real estate a try. So that's where my journey actually began, because my grandmother would watch my brother a lot of times as a real youngin', a newborn practically, and then I would go with my mother on a lot of these appointments, to her office, to trainings, to settlements, to floor duty time. Right. I was the kid in the real estate office doing his homework, trying to take it all in. Got to meet a lot of great people, got to see settlements, got to see house tours and listing appointments. So really fell in love with the people part of real estate and the bricks and mortar part of real estate, and real estate as an asset class as a child growing up.
Right. Okay. And then where did Century 21 Advantage Gold?
So eventually I did get licensed. I did make a legal person out of my real estate practice. So that was in 1996.
Is when you got licensed? Is
when I got licensed. Okay. So I had gotten out of college, went to Temple University, was a major marketing and real estate. And then when I got out of there, went into corporate America for a short period of time. Didn't love it. Right. So said, let me give this real estate thing. I had taken fundamentals and practice, the 2 courses that you need to get your real estate license. I took that at the undergraduate level, even though I wasn't anticipating getting a license. So I went out, got my license, and over the next 9 months worked part-time in real estate, but I had an evening job. So I was able to put a lot of hours towards, so it was part-time maybe in concept, but in effort, it was full-time. Right. And did that for 9 months. And then since 96, by the end of 96, became a full-time realtor and been doing it ever since. Okay. Stepped into brokerage in 2006. So about 10 years later, made the transition from real estate sales agent into brokerage ownership and management. So I still list and sell, but also have a team of agents and brokerage, and we have multiple offices. So made that shift in 2006.
Okay. And then is that where Century 21 came in? Yeah,
so I started, my mother used to own a small independent brokerage called Kaplan Snyder Real Estate down in Pensport, South Philadelphia. And in 2001, we decided to I'm going to say merge. It really wasn't a merger. It was a new entity, but we joined forces with some friends in the business who operated other brokerages as well. And the collection of brokerages came together and we became an Advantage Gold, Century 21 Advantage Gold at that time. So that was 2001.
Okay. And how many offices and agents?
We have 9 branch offices, and they're all surrounding the Philadelphia County. So basically any of the regional migration paths someone would have, we'd want to have a bricks and mortar office to service that. We also have an office in Cherry Hill, New Jersey. Again, normal migration path for a Philadelphia resident. So we have locations in Bucks, Montgomery, Delaware, Cherry Hill, New Jersey, and in multiple locations in Philadelphia as well. So, and we have agent count totals about 235, and each of our branch offices usually runs about 20 to 30 agents in the office. So that's kind of our sweet spot. That's where we like to be, so we can keep up with our training and development.
Very good. Okay. And then GPAR, you were president of that?
So 2 stints as Greater Philadelphia Association of Realtors president. First time back in 2005, and then I came back around to do it again in 2009. So 2 completely different real estate markets. Obviously 2005 real estate flying off the shelves. Yeah. Mortgage money is about as easy to get as you could ever wish, and probably even more than you would wish. And in 2009, where you started to see the transition So it was a great experience for me. Plus, the first time I did it, I was a real estate agent. I was 2005. I didn't have kind of that broker perspective.
Right.
2009, I had been a real estate broker for a number of years, running my team in my office. So I had a little bit different a perspective. So two different markets, two different,
Right.
but I got to see how the association could be really useful and as a resource for real estate agents and brokers in both a up market and in a down market. So
Right.
that was a great perspective for me.
So, in other words, they broke the real estate market. You had to come back and fix it.
Yeah. That's exactly 2005. Everything was humming.
Right, yeah,
I left for a few years, and I don't know what they did, but I had to come back and get it right.
And get it
It was
right.
all me.
Right,
So,
all you. Okay, so what I want to talk about, especially with all your knowledge with GPAR and being on different committees, is the new forms and
Yes.
some of the changes, because August is right around the corner. I mean,
Yeah,
we're talking
yeah.
about a couple of weeks. And, I printed out a bunch of forms here. The biggest takeaway that I see, there's not as many changes as I thought. So I'm kind of surprised at that. But tell me your takeaway, because, it doesn't matter what I think.
No, I agree. I think there's been a lot of information that's been out there. As an industry, any industry, sometimes we fear change. We want to, push it off as far as we can, and sometimes we can really, that avoidance can really escalate what we think we may need to contend with that change. But the truth is, a lot of what we are doing, particularly here in Pennsylvania, because remember, a lot of these changes are around how we're going to handle our listings and any offer of compensation that may or may not be included in those listings. We can no longer offer that offer of compensation through a cooperative, through the MLS. So if we're going to offer independent brokerages like mine, if we're going to offer cooperative compensation, we still can, but we're going to have to do that on our own effort. So I can respond to agents' emails or texts, or hey, are you offering cooperation? I can put it on my company website. I can't put it anywhere with an IDX feed from the MLS. It can't be mentioned in the MLS. You can't put a throw pillow in the MLS that says blank percent
Right.
On the photos. It can't exist in there. But so there's that change, and then there's also the change that a lot of our MLSs, like here locally, we have Bright MLS, which is a large MLS. Each MLS has taken their own look at this, but a Bright MLS has created a seller concession field, which is getting a lot of press right now.
Right.
And so I could go on my listing appointment, and if the seller wishes to in advance offer a concession or open, it'll be handled two ways. One, I can say, yes, we are open to a concession. So it'll be a yes or no option. Mm-hmm. So I can click off yes. And if yes is there, it will then say, optional. Do I want to put a percentage or a dollar amount in? Mm-hmm. Not required to put that in.
Right.
You and I talked about that on the phone the other day. We're not required to put that in, but it does give me the option to. So seller's assistance has been around in real estate as long as I've been here.
Right, forever.
And so buyers have had to negotiate, in some instances, seller's assistance to help with transfer tax, mortgage company fees, title fees, property taxes, all these things that take money out of your wallet. Well, now, if the buyer is going to be the driving force for what the buyer's agent's going to be paid, so the buyer and real estate agent are going to have to come to an agreement on compensation and fee in advance, then there's a mechanism by which that could be handled through some sort of concession. Was already in place.
Right.
So now some of the MLSs are saying, hey, let's make this a little more of a feature that we want to showcase and we want to syndicate out to IDX. So again, it's not about buyer agent compensation or cooperative compensation, but really about whether or not our sellers might want to communicate to the buyers, yes, we're open to concessions here, should you need one.
Right. And then there's a whole library, right? And where does that come from? Who puts that together?
Yeah.
And you mentioned there was about 22 forms that may change or have. some slight changes.
So the way the forms work in each state, so I don't know where I assume most of your viewers are going to be in Pennsylvania, obviously your circle of influence here, but you could have some viewers outside of Pennsylvania. So each state has its own agency laws. So you want to lean on your state association of realtors for the standard forms library. Most, if not all, I'm pretty sure all state association of realtors have their own standard forms library. So you can go to parealtor.org and you will find right now our drafts. And they're drafts not because we're still making changes to them, they're drafts because we're educating on. They're not out to the forms vendors yet. So the Pennsylvania Association of Realtors, so we talked about GPAR, Greater Philadelphia Association of Realtors, previously. Last year, 2023, I had the opportunity to serve as president for the Pennsylvania Association of Realtors. So, we have all the local association of realtors and that cooperate up at the Pennsylvania Association as well. So, and we have a forms committee. It's the standard forms committee. It existed long before any of these changes were coming about. And you have a standard forms library. The way that standard forms library is the intellectual property of years and years and years of real estate agent transactions and experience. And what happens is these forms exist. Real estate agents and brokers sit on the, realtors and brokers sit on the forms committee, some top thinkers across the state. Then we have legal counsel sit on the committee. The Pennsylvania Association of Realtors has in-house staff counsel, has a lot of experience, knows our forms inside and out, transactionally. So that's there. And this forms committee meets quarterly, and basically it's usually, we don't have to do this kind of level of change to 22 forms at once. Right. But just in any period of time, forms were being dissected and looked at. There's a feedback panel. Hey, what's not working? What do we need? The two forms that come to mind, the two addendums, when we had so many short sales in the marketplace, we needed to come up with a short sale addendum to the agreement of sale and listing contract. Came out of the forms committee. Right. Feedback. We talked about what do we need in the marketplace. There were a lot of short sales. Same thing a few years earlier when we had all the price escalations going on. We had to come up with an escalation contingency. There was all these homegrown escalation contingencies that were hitting the marketplace because our practice is going to meet the consumer, our clients, where they need to be. Right. So that's what those markets called for. Our standard forms library evolved. So that's what's happening here. It's just our agreement of sale is a major one that's got to change, mostly because we have to figure out how we're going to handle concessions and change that in the agreement somewhat. There's always been seller's assistance in the agreement, right? But we want to bifurcate that seller's assistance, and we're calling it seller concession now because that's what the lawsuit calls it. That's what the settlement had called it, is the seller concession. Sorry. So now we have two buckets. Right. So it's the seller concession, which might have been your old seller assist. What's the buyer negotiating, if anything, for transfer tax, for the other fees outside of broker's commission, their buyer's broker commission. But then we also want to create its own silo. Hey, much like we used to have on the compensation addendum to the agreement of sale. Hey, here's what I owe my broker, and I'd like to make this a term of the agreement of sale, right, for the seller and buyer to negotiate. So there's a separate cylinder, a separate, place for that to be on the agreement of sale. And so then our agency contracts, our buyer agency contract, our exclusive, our non-exclusive buyer agency contracts had to be adjusted for something similar. And then, of course, in our non-exclusive buyer agency contract, there was never a fee that was in there. Well, I shouldn't say that. There was a fee in there. It said what was offered in the MLS. Right. The broker would accept what was offered in the MLS. Obviously, that's not going to be the case now. But now what it's going to say is, we have to have that agreement with the buyer. That's what the major change of this lawsuit, the settlement is. I keep saying lawsuit. Right. The settlement is that we need to. There's a definitive understanding that we need to have with our buyer clients, and what we're paying, what they're paying us, and what they're getting in return. What expectation can they have? What value will they receive? Much like we've been doing on our listing side of the table for many years. So buyer agency's been here since 1999 in Pennsylvania. Not all states have had that luxury of having buyer agency as seasoned as we do. We just got to do better as an industry to introduce the fee portion of it at an earlier stage in our relationship and in our conversations. I do know that that will be a shift that this will do, but that's something that I'm embracing, and I think the industry needs to embrace.
Right. Now, as far as education, you mentioned there's education, they're rolling out the forms, they're having like these Zoom, education meetings. So go ahead.
So the first thing is the forms are available on parealtor.org. You can get these red line versions of the forms. So in the forms world, the black portion of the print of the text is the same as it's always been. The red version's new. That means it's drawing your attention to it. And the blue text has just been moved in the form. So all the forms are available on the website now. You won't find them with your forms vendor yet. They'll be there in August, but we're trying to educate. So what the Pennsylvania Association of Realtors has done is they have 3 webinars, one that just happened this past Tuesday, that is now archived on the PA Realtor website.
You can go back and
watch it. I encourage. They had 7,000. I think I heard 7,000 realtors that had joined that one webinar just the other day. So that's where the attorneys for the Pennsylvania Association of Realtors are getting into the nuts and bolts of the major forms. There's 22 forms, but you really only have to wrap your head around some things conceptually. Some of the forms are very minor changes.
Right.
Once you understand the concept in the bigger forms, the agreements of sale, and we have multiple agreements of sale. We have the commercial agreement, we have the residential, the land agreement. We got the prefab. We got all these agreements, so those are each their own form, and then the listing contract and the agency contracts. But join on. There's 2 more webinars. Watch the one that just occurred. That's archived there. There's also a broker webinar that occurred a couple weeks ago that's archived. You can get your hands on the Pennsylvania Association of Realtors website. And then there's 2 more rolling out over the next couple weeks. Definitely join on. Even if you saw the first one, join on, because I'm sure there'll be a few other nuances. We're going to need to hear this a few times before we get our head on it. But go back to what you said earlier. The changes, really, once you understand that you need to, a lot of this is going to be driven by your relationship with the buyer and a fee understanding between you and your client. Once that's out of the way, the changes are very easy to digest.
Exactly.
Very easy to digest.
It's minimal.
Right.
It's really just that one discussion.
You bring it there, and of course, how we communicated to each other. We were very, it was very comfortable shoes to be able to go into the MLS at any given time and know if my competitor down the street was offering compensation on something that was out there and what it was. Those were super comfortable shoes that I think we all grew accustomed to. So that'll take some change, but I know in brokerages, you have to decide, are you still going to offer cooperative compensation? Because that's not going away. It's just how we're advertising it, can't be in a cooperative, in a collective, like the MLS. So, but I can still put on my website, I can still put a sign writer up and say, hey, buyer agent compensation being offered here. So the brokerage needs to decide, are we going into, the sellers and the agents, are we going to go to the cooperative compensation piece, or in conjunction with a seller concession piece.
Right.
Because that's the thing that I do fear a little bit, is that the 17th is going to roll around and that you're going to have all the existing listings that are in the MLS presently that currently offer cooperative compensation, and then that's going to go away. And my fear is you're going to see a a number of real estate agents are just going to say, okay, well, what was the number that was there?
Right.
And let me go drop that into
To
the
the
seller concession box, which isn't why that box is being created.
Right.
And they're going to have no conversation with their seller about that. They're going to do nothing to modify their agreement, their listing agreement for that. They're just going to do it because this is the way we're going to circumvent. And the Association of Realtors is not looking to circumvent the agreement. We're looking to meet the customers, the clients where they are, and the MLSs are coming up with these fields because they anticipate some demand on communicating concessions to the buyer consumers out there and some sellers. I mean, one of the most interesting calls I got was right after the settlement was signed. I got a seller who's one of my repeat clients, an investor. Mostly he bought and hold over the years. He had a lot of rental properties, but occasionally he would sell one of those rental properties off. He'd hire our brokerage to do it, and he always offered cooperative compensation through his listing contract with us. And he's a big believer in it. So he read the settlement or the headlines of the settlement, and he was like, "I can't do this anymore. Like, how dare they take this tool away from me, a seller, not a real estate agent, a seller, to be able to incentivize the buyer agent community to come." And so once I educated him on, we can still offer it, and that you might even want to take a look at this, this other line that's going to be an option for you as a way to communicate your openness to negotiate with a buyer. Again, if the buyer's driving the negotiation and the buyer sees value in their buyer agent getting paid and they don't want to stroke a check themselves, the buyer can always do that.
Right.
If they want to make it part of the negotiation, then all the mechanics of this is still in place, and we can still go operate in many ways similar to what we did before.
Right.
We just have to change some of the mechanics of it, and it all starts with the buyer understanding what our relationship is and what my fee would be.
Right. Okay. So, biggest takeaway. 200 and plus agents, 235, 234, whatever the number you mentioned. What are they saying? Do they have any apprehension? What are they saying, basically?
Yeah, there's definitely apprehension because it's change, but much like, I go back to when our MLS changed, there were different versions of our MLS, and every time they would do an upgraded version of it, there would always be this resistance. And that's a much more minor change, but it impacted us in a way that some of us were like, we don't want to change. We're doing it this way, and this is the way we're going to do, so there's definitely some of that apprehension. But once I have the conversation with them, most people are working on either bad information or limited information. And, there's so many avenues for information now at people's fingertips, and particularly what's being shared on social media, for clickbait, all these so-called experts, some of those people have really good information. Some of them, not so much. And remember, any national information you get might not hold muster in Pennsylvania, so there could be a really wonderful real estate trainer who you've grown to rely on a national level in your real estate business, and they may be talking about some boots and suspenders way to handle these changes. And again, good intentioned information, but might not be how we need to. Rubber's going to meet road here in Pennsylvania. So I keep going back to the agents. We need to rely on our state association of realtors, particularly in this matter, because it's around agency law and our forms and our practice. And then we need to keep an open line of communication to ourselves with whatever objections we're getting or adversity that we might be hitting in the marketplace, because as we communicate with each other and understand this a little bit more, we'll adapt. We're a very adaptable industry when we have to adapt. So, and we'll meet the client where the client wants to be met. And I've seen too many bear hugs, even back when I was a little kid in that real estate office with my mother, too many buyer bear hugs to their buyer agent or someone who helped on the buyer side, because back then there was no buyer agency, but to the real estate agent who helped the buyer, there were so many bear hugs and appreciation. I know our industry as a whole delivers value on the buyer side of the table. We just got to get better at articulating that to the buyer, much like we have to our sellers for decades.
Right.
We've sellers sign contracts with us all the time. There's an understanding in place. There's no surprises with the fee. So let's treat the buyer with that commodity. That's what I really think is the best part of this is. I've always seen three things in every transactions I've been in. There's always been a seller, there's always been a buyer, and there's always been either a piece of land or a property on a piece of land. And yet we didn't treat our buyers with the same level of respect industry-wide as I think we've treated our sellers. And some of that was allowed for, and maybe even in practice, was buyer agency came much later than seller agency came. So this is an opportunity to equal that playing field. And frankly, I think the buyers deserve that respect.
Absolutely.
And we'll be there to meet it, and get yourself, updated on these forms, get yourself updated on the talk tracks around them, and you'll be fine.
Okay. So you're still selling?
Yes.
You're still listing, dealing with buyers, the whole shoot match, right? So if somebody wanted to get a hold of you, want to know more about you, or just know more about these forms, just ask a question, how would they do that?
Well, you can find me on all kinds of social media, Albert Perry, Perry. Our company website is c21ag.com. You can Google me. You can find me pretty easily. But yeah, I'm here. I've been same phone number as I've had for many years. I'm not one to migrate from place to place to place. You won't have any problem finding me.
Okay. Well, thanks for being on the show. Great information. I really wanted you on here because, August is right around the corner and there's going to be a lot of changes coming about. So that's the Real Estate Show with Pat Lopez. Be sure to follow the show on Facebook, Instagram, and subscribe below. I have great guests like Al on the show talking and giving all their knowledge. Also, leave a comment or tell me some topics you want me to cover in the future. Remember, this show is everything real estate, no limits.